Okay, you fans of American popular culture of the 20th century, I'm a little bit south of Hollywood Boulevard on Vine Street in the epicenter of Old Hollywood, and right there at the Hollywood Plaza Hotel, built in 1925, is where some of the most famous people of the 20th century stayed, including Ernest Hemingway in 1937 when he was showcasing his film Tierra España about the Spanish Civil War. This is where during the 40s and 50s, Frank Sinatra, old Blue Eyes himself, used to get his haircut in the basement by his favorite barber, Joe Olivo. And after he used to get his haircut there, they said he used to play gin rummy. And in this building, in the 1930s and 40s, George Burns kept his offices on the 10th floor. And he said that when he was supposed to meet a young fledgling Marilyn Monroe, he said that when she walked in, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And he said, for once, an agent didn't lie. Okay, now, right here on Vine Street in 1938, this was called Radio City West because NBC Radio City put their Art Deco building. It was a green, beautiful building on the corner of Sunset and Vine. And I can't believe that they tore it down in 1964. And then CBS Columbia Square was around the corner in 1938. That they built that there, and then it's still there, thankfully. Well, when the big band era started, Hal McIntyre, Paul Whiteman, and Harry James used to stay here, and a lot of the stars, when they would come in from back east, they would stay here at the Hollywood Plaza Hotel. Now, in 1937, there was a nightclub called the Russian Eagle Nightclub, and the it girl herself, Clara Bow, and her husband, Rex Bell, they turned the restaurant right there on the right. It was actually a nightclub, a Russian Eagle nightclub. She turned that into the It Cafe. And it was in business from 1937 to 1943. And on the side there of the building, right there on the side, on the corner right there, just to show you how what they think about the heritage of Old Hollywood, there was a painting there that said Clara Bow's It Cafe. I can't believe it. The landlords, they should have made a law that you can't paint over old signs. And it was right here in the corner. It said Clara Bow's It Cafe. And this, like I said, this right here was the Russian Eagle nightclub. And then it was turned into the It Cafe. And then it was a restaurant after that, after 1943. And in these doors, like I said, the most famous of film stars, Broadway stars, writers, William Faulkner, Dashiell Hammett, along with Ernest Hemingway, of course. Here's where I met, where they had the sign, the It Cafe, and they painted over it. No appreciation for the heritage of American history. And I just wanted to say, I guess they check their sources, because this is where they put Frank Sinatra's star, possibly because this was his favorite hangout, like I said, in the 40s and 50s. Okay, now, if you were a kid in the 60s, early 60s, and of course the 1950s, in the ballroom right here at the Hollywood Plaza Hotel, from 1956 to 1964, Jack Bailey used to broadcast Queen for a Day, and he'd start that show with that goofy Question, who wants to be queen for a day? If they had a show like that today, poor Jack Bailey, he'd have to walk through a picket line. Okay, well, this is where they filmed it. Queen for a Day in the ballroom. And like I said, a lot of famous people from all over the world, this is where they'd stay. Now, getting over here now, continuing this little tour, right here at this Montalban Theater, which was built in 1925. It was actually originally a movie theater. And in 1936, when Lux Radio Theater came out west from New York, this is where they broadcasted, right here from starting in 1936. Now they had Lux Radio Theater was broadcasting on NBC in New York in 1934 and 1935, and then they moved out west, and then they started here. This was actually a movie theater owned by Howard Hughes in the 1920s when he came out from Texas. And when the Lux Radio Theater started broadcasting on CBS, then they called this theater the Cbs Playhouse Theatre. And from 1936 to 1945, Cecil B. DeMille, he was the host. And in fact, the first broadcast out of here in 1936 was with it was a radio adaptation of famous movies at the time period. This is what the Lux Radio Theater was. And the first radio adaptation was of Morocco with Marlene Dietrich and Clark Gable, and it was called The Legionnaire and the Lady. And in fact, 2 nights ago I heard it for the first time. I can't believe how spontaneous, how well they could read their lines without flubbing them. Well, right here where you see a lot of pictures from the 30s, 40s, the 50s, and to get people through the Great Depression and World War II, all the tragedy, this is where the United States audience would tune into. And if you were at all curious, this is where it was at. And even though Cecil B. DeMille said we are in the biggest theater in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard, he meant Hollywood and Vine. And this is where, like I said, the Lux Radio Theater played from 1936 to 1955. Okay, now let's go back. And I want to show you fans, it's not here. They replaced it instead with this concrete, glass and steel postmodern monstrosity right over there adjacent to that old facade. That Spanish colonial facade was where the famous Brown Derby, the Hollywood Brown Derby that had hundreds of caricatures of famous movie stars. From 1929 to 1982, it was torn out to replace it with this junk right here. This is where the Cobb salad was invented. Right there where that Metro M sign is, that's where it was at, adjacent to that old facade right there. And that's where Clark Gable proposed to Carole Lombard. And that's where they invented the Shirley Temple drink for a young Shirley Temple at the time. But as you can see, it was torn out. And if you're at all curious, if you've ever seen Hollywood at Last, and which was broadcast February 7th, 1955 on the I Love Lucy show, where she was supposed to be dining at the Hollywood Brown Derby, that's where it was supposed to be at. You know the scene where she's sitting in the back of William Holden, and where the waiter drops a pie in him? Well, that's where it was supposed to be at, and unfortunately there it is. Now I just want to say about these people that run Hollywood, run Los Angeles, I don't understand why they tear everything out and they put these really high-end expensive lofts, and why they don't preserve the old buildings. Like, luckily they preserved the CBS Radio Playhouse, and why I don't understand why they don't put, like they do in the United Kingdom, they have these things called blue plaques everywhere, and they let you know what event happened in such a place, what book was written in such a place, what certain famous personage was born in a certain house. But what we do in America, I just want the world to see, we tear mostly everything down and replace it with ultra-modern edifices, and then we forget our heritage. And then when millions of people come to Hollywood, they go, where's Hollywood? Well, they tore it down and they put a parking lot. So this was Radio City West, starting in 1938. Now follow me on this little tour, and I'll show you fans where Radio City West was, and the first ABC radio studio was. And so follow me, and thank you for watching, and let's continue this tour of Vine Street in Hollywood, California. Thank you.